October 2009, a foreigner walks through the streets of North Korea completely alone. No bodyguards, no protection, no clear way to leave if things go wrong. Just him, and a city that feels like it's watching back. Citizens whisper carefully, and one wrong move could make him disappear forever. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't trained. He wasn't a spy. And yet, for the next 6 years, he would live inside one of the most secretive regimes on Earth, reportedly gaining access to information outsiders couldn't easily obtain. The world's most locked country, and somehow he was inside it. So the real question is, how did an ordinary man become one of the most dangerous prisoners in North Korea? And more importantly, what did he discover that almost cost him his life? North Korea isn't just another country, it's a system built on control. Everything is monitored constantly, every movement tracked, every visitor observed, every interaction quietly recorded. Nothing happens without attention. At least that's what outsiders believe. For decades, the world has tried to understand what was happening inside, but they kept failing. Satellites could see buildings, but not conversations. Defectors could tell stories, but often years too late. Even major organizations were forced to rely on fragments, estimates, outdated information. In simple words, no one truly knew what was happening inside. Getting a spy into that country wasn't just difficult, it was nearly impossible, because North Korea remained one of the hardest places to truly understand. You couldn't just sneak in. You had to belong there. You had to live there. You had to become invisible. And for years, no one could do it until one man accidentally did. But he didn't arrive as a spy. He walked in as something far more harmless, a businessman. And that decision would change everything. His name is Kim Dong-chul, born in South Korea, later becoming a US citizen. His life looked completely ordinary, and on paper, nothing about him explains this story. He wasn't trained in espionage. He wasn't part of the military. He was a pastor, and later, a businessman. Nothing that screams deep cover operation. But life doesn't always follow logic. In the early 2000s, he began working in regions near North Korea. Business ties, cross-border projects, humanitarian work. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then something changed. Through personal connections, he received a rare opportunity, an invitation to enter North Korea legally. For most people, that door never opens, but for him, it did. He invested heavily into a project. He gained trust. He built relationships inside the system. And slowly, he stopped looking like an outsider. He became part of the environment. According to reports, even officials began treating him like a legitimate operator. Think about that for a second. An American trusted inside North Korea. But here's where things take a turn, because while he's building a life inside, someone else may have been watching from outside. And they didn't just see a businessman. They may have seen something else entirely, an opportunity. And eventually, a question is asked, a simple one, but it changes everything. Would you like to cooperate with us? The decision wasn't simple. If he refused, his life would continue normally. If he accepted, every single day could be his last. No protection plan, no backup, no guarantee of safety. But according to some accounts, he said yes. And just like that, an ordinary man was allegedly drawn into sharing sensitive information. Inside North Korea, his life splits in two. On the surface, nothing changes. He still runs his business, still talks to officials, still smiles, jokes, acts normal, but underneath it all, everything changes. Every conversation becomes risk. Every meeting becomes a possibility. Every mistake could expose him. Slowly, he begins collecting information, small details at first. How to observe without standing out, how to remember without writing things down, how to move carefully in a place where mistakes aren't forgiven, not through training, but through survival. At first, it's small things, patterns, movements, names, behavior, nothing major. But then something shifts because he realizes something important. He can't do this alone. So he expands carefully, building connections over time. Some may have done it for money, some for survival, some may not have fully understood what they were part of. And just like that, what some reports describe as a small network of contacts begins forming. But every new connection came with a cost, because the more people involved, the harder it became to stay hidden. And eventually, that pressure would start to show. Years passed. 1 year, 2 years, 3, and somehow he was still there, still unnoticed, still gathering information no outsider had ever accessed before. But in a system like this, nothing stays unnoticed forever, because control systems don't react fast. They react slowly. They observe first, then they analyze. Nothing obvious, but enough to raise suspicion. And in a system built on paranoia, suspicion is everything. At first, they watch quietly. No confrontation, no warning, just observation, waiting. Because in North Korea, they don't act fast. They act when they're certain. Meanwhile, he keeps going, because stopping isn't an option. If he suddenly leaves, it could raise even more questions. If he stays, the risk keeps growing. He is trapped between two dangers: leave and become suspicious, stay and get caught. So he chooses to continue, hoping he still has time. But then something unexpected happens. A small incident, a disagreement, a moment of anger. And that single moment may have been the one thing that finally exposed him. By 2015, everything changed. The environment felt different. More eyes watching, more tension in the air. And then it happened. During what seemed like a routine interaction, something went wrong. A contact approached him openly, too openly, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And suddenly, everything felt off. Within moments, authority stepped in. No warning, no escape. He was taken, blindfolded, isolated, gone. Just like that, 6 years of silence ended instantly. What followed was brutal. Interrogations, pressure, relentless questioning. They wanted everything. Names, methods, connections. According to reports, investigators were trying to uncover the full extent of his activities. And in that moment, the man who had survived for years was now completely powerless. Eventually, he was sentenced. Years of hard labor inside one of the harshest systems in the world. The same country he had lived in now became his prison. But even then, the story wasn't over, because outside those walls, something unexpected was happening, and it would change his fate once again. In 2018, he was released, alive, but changed, weakened, physically and mentally affected, carrying years of experience most people will never understand. And his story leaves behind something deeper than just events, because for 6 years, he lived inside a system most people only read about. He did what others couldn't. He lived inside North Korea, and according to reports, he gathered information that any outside don't have access to. He proved even the most closed systems have cracks, but the cost was immense. His freedom, his health, and the lives around him. So, was it worth it? There's no simple answer, because this isn't a story of victory or defeat. It's about how far someone can go before the system catches up, and in the end, he didn't escape it, he survived it.